See what happens. In some cases, it is happening. Toxic debt, never heard of it before. Never heard of it. And again, I've already explained the idea that in this bundle of mortgages that were sold into the world's markets, some of them were toxic. Some of them were subprime. But which ones are subprime? You don't know that this AAA rated instrument has got some toxic debt in it until you get defaults. Banking crisis, nothing new in that, but we didn't expect that, did we? Since the Great Depression. Depression, that's a headache, by the way. That's a real headache. And somebody in America a few months ago has actually defined depression. Stuart made a small mistake, but I forgive him for that. We didn't have a definition of a time period until recently, and it's only a journalistic definition, by the way. Somebody has said, if you have negative, falling GDP for 8 consecutive quarters, we'll call that a depression. Imagine your sales are falling for 8 consecutive quarters. Yeah, you'll feel pretty depressed. Well, it looks like the major economies, such as US and UK, the most seriously affected economies, are probably, not all, are going to avoid depression. We think the UK will increase, will have growth next quarter. We expect it last quarter, by the way. So we're going to have only 6 quarters, so relief. Depression isn't going to happen. Sorry, I'm touching all the wood possible here. Possibly not going to happen. And then another 1930s phrase, similar to the paradox of thrift, liquidity trap. Again, we talked about a theoretical possibility that people would not want to spend and they would put their money under the bed. Always comparing with Japan, and they were doing that in Japan. The sale of personal security boxes in Japan rose faster in the 1990s than the sale of fridges in Japan. Liquidity trap is when you hold money for the sake of holding money. And actually that's a very good idea. Because if you've got deflation, what happens to the value of money? It goes up. So you're making a real return by not spending it. But once our psychology triggers that mindset, then when do we start spending? I was in Atlanta last year, or earlier this year actually, with a company doing some work. And I was being driven back to the airport by a taxi driver, and he pointed out what Stuart just told us. He said those properties were sold at the peak for $340,000. The bank has foreclosed. They're now in the market for $40,000. And I said to the taxi driver, how many of you bought? He says, oh, not me, they're too expensive. Imagine you bought the one the day before at $340,000. What are you going to do? You hand the keys back. Quantitative easing, a phrase that did not exist before this crisis. The idea that if you pump enough liquidity into an economy, that sooner or later the banks will start to lend it. And hopefully we'll start to borrow it. In Japan they did this, by the way. They did something else. They issued what were called happy vouchers during the crisis. They gave people the equivalent in yen of $100. Free money. Please spend. Start spending. People spent it, but they kept their own money. That was not the plan. The plan was spend more to create a multiplier effect. And so with quantitative easing, yeah, of course it has helped, but the amount of money we've pumped in, we should have seen a lot more activity than what we've seen already. And finally, again was mentioned already indirectly, CDOs. That's these bundles of mortgages. They've got collateral. Collateralized debt obligations. They must be okay. They're backed by property. They must be AAA rated. We now know in hindsight that's not the case. So, what happened? I've mentioned global imbalances, primary cause of this crisis. America in particular, and I would say UK, the Anglo-Saxon world in that sense, spending beyond their means, relying on the rest of the world, lending money or investing in those countries, particularly America. The first law of banking, as we heard earlier. Global imbalances on a scale that were immense. But the second point is critical. Again, alluded to by Stuart, just to add a bit more detail to it. In the last 30 years, and particularly in the last 10 years, we have seen such a growth in complexity of financial products that I wonder who actually understands them. If you wanted to make money as a young graduate in London or New York, study mathematics. Be a mathematician and create these financial products. So technical that nobody understands them, but they will get a closer, a finer and finer balance between risk-return. And it'll all be okay, of course. Well, it's not okay. Now, I'm going to do an experiment here. So I want honesty in this room. I want total honesty. Please. I want you to imagine that tomorrow morning, you go into your office, and somebody has offered you a contract, and if you sign this contract on behalf of your company, you will get in your bank tomorrow night guaranteed €10 million bonus. That's your bonus for doing that, I don't know, real estate deal. Guaranteed. And you know that the next day your company will go bankrupt. But your bonus is in your bank. Who will do the deal? Come on. It's guaranteed, folks. Don't be shy. You'll do the deal. That's the mentality we've seen in the banking sector, in the Anglo-Saxon world. Selling on these mortgage bundles, as Stuart said, until somebody discovers, uh-oh, there's a problem here. They're not worth the paper they're written on. Short-term bonus. And that's what the authorities in America and in the UK and Europe are trying to stop. I don't know how they're going to stop it, by the way, on a global scale. I see Goldman Sachs going to pay out $45 billion bonuses this Christmas. That's the estimated bonus package. So we're back to the good old days of bonuses again. And some companies, by the way, pay the bonuses on a quarterly basis. You don't have to wait till the end of the year. You get it quarterly. So after one quarter, I'm gone. Give me the 10 million. I'm away. And therefore, risk your operations based on the belief, and this is critical, at the upside, not the upside risk, the upside return will be turned into dividends. In other words, take the bet, it'll pay off. Let me try that again. I want you to give me 10 euros each. And I'm going to give you 100 euros when I place the bet. That sounds good, yeah? That's the upside benefit. But the danger is, if you give me 10 euros, you might get nothing. You might lose it. But the upside is 100, the downside is 10. Will you place the bet? Sure, you will. And again, that's the mentality that drove this market. The belief was that the worst case scenario is that shareholders lose their value. That's the worst case scenario. But there's no limit to the upside. So we'll keep on doubling the bet. Keep on doubling the bet. But all bets don't pay off. And finally, of course, a belief on the part of the financial institutions that they would be bailed out by creditors and by government. And you know something? They were right. Apart from Lehman Brothers. And in hindsight, I think George Bush probably would have bailed it out in hindsight. On September the 15th last year. That's the spark. But we're all guilty. I say all. Homeowners in general. Again, alluded to by Stuart. We've all, I mean, come on, let's be honest. Who wants their property to rise in value? Come on, everybody. Therefore, when it's rising in value, we feel good. The feel-good factor. And we've all enjoyed limited liability. I won't linger on this point because Stuart made the point already. But there's one extra aspect to this. How can somebody be given a mortgage more than the value of a property? That's reckless. That's in the belief that property prices always rise. But let me test this. You all know it. If you go to a bank and you get a mortgage and you sign the document, you know, now you're